Hello, this is Rhondda Racing, and we've just had the Mexican Grand Prix. So, the Mexican Grand Prix is the second shortest circuit on the calendar. Super high altitude compared to everywhere else. Big heating problems. Possibly big tyre problems. People thinking, I think even on an interview on the grid walk, the race director of Racing Point said he didn't think that many people were going to manage to do a two-stop. He thought most people would be free-stopping. But in the end, most people did end up one-stopping, and it was a bit of a mixed bag of a race, honestly, because I said to my friend afterwards, if that race had been a BTCC race and it was 15 to 25 laps long or something, it would have been a banger. But it was one of those races that we've got too many times in recent years in F1 where it started off, set up for some exciting possibilities. It was an interesting start, right? There was a bit of drama, but mostly it went well. Wasn't anything too crazy. And then it set up for, can this person do that? Lots of questions of excitement, and they all just were answered with no, not really, honestly. Obviously, to start off, I'll have to talk about Max Verstappen in qualifying. It's such a silly mistake to make because he was already on pole and then he just blatantly ignores a yellow flag and gets kicked off of pole. And it was the way as well, watching the commentary, Crofty said, well, that's ruined, yellow flag in the last sector has ruined anyone's chance of improving. And then as he was talking about it, you just see that little fastest lap pop up on Verstappen and you're just like, excuse me? Excuse me? I'm not gonna get in on the if he hadn't have said anything he wouldn't have got away with it sort of thing. I hope that if the FIA would have let that go, I would have been just so upset. You can't not notice that. Come on. But before we go into talking about the race and the results and such, I do want to have a quick rant on one other thing, which is the amount of the coverage and the amount of tweets and the amount of everything that was focused around will Hamilton win the championship this race. Because I can't remember who it was. I think it was Herbert. If it wasn't him, I'm sorry to whoever said it. If it was him, God bless Herbert. Because I'm pretty sure they asked this question on one of the days leading up to the race, and Johnny Herbert just immediately said no. Because that was the reasonable answer. They should have brought it up once at the beginning of the race and said it's possible if he gets 14 points more than Bottas, but it's unlikely. And then they should not have talked about it again until it looked like a possibility, which it never did. The lengths Hamilton had to beat Bottas by for him to win the championship this day, I'm not sure have happened at all this year. Even in Bottas's worst races where people were saying, oh, he's gone back to old Bottas, he's not competitive anymore. Even then, he wasn't that far down the field, right? Hamilton would have had to win, which didn't always look like a certainty, and he would have had to lose to at least one of the Red Bulls. It just never seemed likely to me, and it triggered me non-stop when people kept going on about it. So yeah, stop with stupid storylines. Let's get to the actual racing where all the actual real storylines and fun happened. And I'm going to start at the bottom because I feel like that's the way to do it. And look at that. I didn't even plan that, but your boy Norris is up the picture first. The picture's going to be entirely random. I could probably put a bit more pre-work in to get them to be the ones that I want to talk about, but for now, I'm just starting up, so I'm just gonna sort of ramble over these guys. Norris, I'm gonna leave talking about his performance in the actual race until we get to Sainz, so I can discuss them together. But poor boy had his first real pit stop calamity. Actually, I feel like he might have had a bad pit stop before, but poor boy didn't have his wheel put on correctly, and that's something was sort of a trend. wheels not quite going on and ruining people's pit stops happened 3 or 4 times during this race, like way more than you would usually see. And I think commentators mentioned it, Crofty and Brundle. They mentioned maybe it's like to do with the heat, like changing how the guns read how much torque they've put in, and they think they've pushed enough in, but they haven't because it's hotter, and so But whatever it was, that seemed to be a real issue this weekend for some of the teams. The other DNF we have is Raikkonen, who apparently I can't remember what it was from, but apparently he picked up some floor damage early on. And he said he was feeling fine at the start of the race, but when they switched tyres, everything just fell apart and he couldn't do it. Then we're moving up to the actual race finishes. At the back is predictably a Williams. Although actually the Williams have still consistently looked closer and closer, and I think Russell said that this weekend they thought they'd be able to fight with the Alphas and the Haas. And they didn't manage to with the Alphas. The Alphas were still consistently ahead of them until Raikkonen retired. But the Haas, they really do seem to be closing up on them. I mean, Haas have clearly entirely given up and gone to 2020 now. And it really just like, they might as well be Williams now. I think John T from Johnny's Corner said this, and people were thinking it was a bit extreme at the time he said it, but it has really sort of come to pass. Like, the Haas are just another real backmarker now. And in one of his last races, shout out to Kubica, who actually was ahead of Russell for a lot of the race. Like, pretty consistently ahead until he had, I believe, a slow puncture or something near the end. He had to pit again, like right near the end for some reason. I'm pretty sure it was a slow puncture. So he did a pit stop on like the like with like 9 laps to go or something, and it was just like no one would actually make that stop if chosen to. It was just an unfortunate thing that put him down to the back. But he was ahead of Russell and Grosjean to the end of that. The Houses I'm not going to talk about because, as I said, it's just sad. But all I'll say on the Williams is, glad to keep seeing that they are improving, and hopefully they can have a good car for 2020. Giovinazzi, sad that the Alfa as well, like, just doesn't have the speed it had. They had like a period in the middle of the season where they were actually going really well, but that's sort of dropped off now, and Gio just had sort of a quiet race. Not fast enough to really challenge any of the cars ahead of him, but also not slow enough to fall into the clutches of the cars behind, so that sort of sucked. And now we get Sainz, who, it's so sad to see him down here. I honestly, he was doing so well throughout the whole race, and I feel like it honestly slipped up on me. Suddenly, I got to the end of the race, and I looked down at the other drivers, and I was just like, why is Sainz there? Like, he was running like strong sixth for most of the race while Verstappen was making his comeback, and then just suddenly he was down here. They just sort of like lost steam, I guess, throughout the race, and then like he fell down a bit on the hards, and then he was one of the people doing a 2-stop, and he did a second stop onto mediums, and just must have not had pace. He did a lot of laps on the mediums. He did almost more than anyone else. The only people who did more laps on the median were Grosjean, and Bottas and Vettel. So he did, maybe rinse those tyres a bit, but he also had a sort of awkward 2-stopper. It looks like he maybe didn't plan it because he went soft, hard, medium, whereas most of the other 2-stoppers went medium, medium, hard. So, I mean, he would definitely need to do a 2-stop, but you know what I mean? Like, because he had to start on the soft. He did say at the beginning of the weekend that he was happy that, I think he described it as McLaren are thinking like a top team because they did their first Q2 time on a soft to see if they could get through, which, I mean, clearly they couldn't, right? Like, I don't think anyone should have actually thought they could have, but they gave it a try, which, it does show mentality, at least, of wanting to move a bit forward. But this weekend really dive bombed for McLaren because as I referenced before with Norris, on the first lap, they were right up there. They both got in front of Bottas pretty early on. Sainz, after Hamilton and Verstappen had their little coming together, Sainz was ahead of Hamilton. At the start of the race, the order was, I believe, Leclerc, Vettel, Albon, and then Sainz. Then Hamilton, Norris, Bottas. And of course, both the Mercedes got past them eventually. Bottas had a little struggle getting past Norris. But by the first stint, everything sort of had normalised out. But yeah, like, I think this is now like the third or maybe even fourth race in a row where the McLarens have had blinding starts. So if they can get their car just a little bit faster, just fast enough that the Mercedes can't easily overtake them, they could start holding on to some of these better positions for longer. They could disrupt the race more. With how good their start's been and how bad some of the Mercedes starts have been, sometimes the Red Bulls have had a few bad starts, so they could really start taking some track position early on. And on some of the tracks, elsewhere in the year where it's harder to overtake, that could be good. A little point here before I start getting to top ones. A lot of people did talk about that, how easy it should be to overtake here. Track layout wise, it should be. But the heat and the lack of air really affected cooling. Like, the amount of times, especially with Mercedes, like the Mercedes here had to win on strategy from the very start. Because every time they pulled up behind another car, like, there was a period where Bottas, I think both behind Leclerc and Vettel at different periods in the race, he seemed faster. But he just would be behind them for a lap and then would have to drop back. And then, could just about catch up, but as he was catching up, he'd have to drop back again because his brakes are overheating again. So they just couldn't fight. Like, the Mercedes just had to get clean air and then just roll. And just don't let anyone pass you and just keep your position and hope that strategy wins out. And they both did one stop, which did turn out in the end to be the better strategy. Even though Hamilton was worried that he wouldn't get his hards to the end because he stopped early, and Vettel absolutely rinsed his mediums. So it definitely, some people saying, oh yeah, it was easy. It was clearly easy, but I don't think I'd quite give it that much. But it definitely turned out that two stopping seems to be the way to go. If you look at the order that cars came in. So then we get up to who are we at now? Stroll. Stroll just had a legit race, right? Typical Stroll qualifying. I think he was 15th, right, just above the Haas and the Williams, but did fine in the race. It wasn't one of the big boy Stroll nights though. Some of those times where he makes up a ton of places in the race, and I'm like, yes, go boy. But he did fine, right? So above him, I'm slightly concerned here that I may have got this wrong somehow. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. That's triggered my brain again. So the live timing page that I have open to see the pit stops, to remind me who did free stoppers and not, has Kvyat a lot higher than this. But that's because he did finish higher than this. He actually finished in 9th, but was given a penalty near the end of the race because good old Torpedo, he went and did a torpedo. He dive bombed Hulkenberg on the last lap, took him out, and it was a sad moment for him because Hulkenberg's doing all right, was running ninth, I believe, and then just got absolutely knocked out by Kvyat. It was one of those late race, last ditch effort sort of things. It wasn't too bad. It was like a little tap, but he just went in a little bit too hot and couldn't make it out. So unlucky for Kvyat there. Lost the points he could have got. Hulkenberg, as I said, got bapped. The Renaults weren't looking super good, but as you can see a little bit further up, Ricciardo still managed to finish ahead of both of the Toro Rossos, and with how good they were looking in practice and even in qualifying, that's not bad. Right, we then get Gasly, who obviously finished just behind his teammate before his teammate got the penalty, picking up some points, which I believe keeps him in the championship, keeps him ahead of Sainz because Sainz finished so low. But Albon's obviously catching up real fast now. It definitely looks like Albon's going to pass them both before the end. But Sainz Gasly is like a little nice fight there for best of the rest to see who can get it. Although it's a bit unfair on Sainz, seeing as Gasly spent half the season in the Toro Rosso. But anyway, we then get to basically the two drivers who were today best of the rest, which, because Sainz had his big fallings, I don't know what you call it, falling down the tables, it was Ricciardo and the homeboy Perez. Perez had a cracking race the whole time, put up a good show in front of his crowd, got some good overtakes. There was a brilliant moment where Ricciardo tried to take the best of rest from Perez, did a big boy dive bomb, and just locked straight onto the grass and had to give the place back up to Perez. He actually got around the corner before Perez, which really did not look possible. It was a really odd one, but he obviously immediately gave the place back because he knew he'd have to anyway. And Perez went on to finish best of rest, which is nice for him. Then get to Verstappen. Verstappen obviously had the we're getting to the chunky part of the conversation now, because Verstappen obviously had the altercations at the start. He definitely seemed pissed from the qualifying and was just trying a bit too hard. The first lap stuff with Hamilton, I don't think was really his fault, or was really Hamilton's fault. It really looked like they were both just sort of not quite going right. But the bomb he tried to do on Bottas just did not work. He just absolutely clipped it. I remember Crofty saying at the time, a brilliant move there from Verstappen, and I was like, a messy move there, come on. A messy move there. Oh yeah. Hello Ocon, you're not meant to be here until next season. I have to remove him from that folder until next season. But yeah, Verstappen just really did it to himself. Popped one of his wheels, had to pit early, and then a strong drive back. But in that car with a driver as good as him, like, I don't think you could expect any less. Again, like, even though people were having trouble with following a car and heating, the Red Bull was so much faster than everyone else behind him that he just soared through the field. Great driving from him as always, but couldn't quite get back up to his teammate, which is good to see, because obviously in the Gasly days, there was a lot of Gasly's a lap behind Verstappen. What the hell's happening? Like, they're in the same car. It doesn't look like the same car. But Albon is consistently worse than Verstappen, but consistently making the Red Bull look like the Red Bull should, which is, a good sign for Albon. He's looking stronger and stronger that he'll keep that seat next year. Then we get to the top. Leclerc and Albon both did the two-stop, free tyres and two-stop. And just didn't work out that well. They just got stuck behind the people who had the long splits. Bottas, great race from him, super consistent. Nothing really to talk about. He was caught up behind Norris maybe a little bit longer than he should, but got past him fine in the end. The rest of the race was pretty smooth sailing from him. Vettel, Vettel and Hamilton are sort of the interesting part where the strategy played out, because Vettel ended up with a better strategy than Leclerc because he was on the one stop. But there was the one interesting bit of this was where Hamilton went in earlier than almost anyone else out of the top drivers who were one stopping for his first stop. Got on the hards real early and was like, right, I'm going to run these hards to the ground. Vettel then tried to do the opposite, where Ferrari suggested bringing him in the lap after Hamilton, but Vettel pointed out, probably undercut me if we do that, like, tyres feel fine, can I just rinse these out and keep going? So he actually did 40 laps on the soft tyres. Pretty mental. Bottas did one less than him. I think Bottas pitting forced Vettel in. And the idea, which, isn't a bad idea, was that he would have, 14 or so laps better tyres at the end. And that would, somehow set him up to win. But fortunately, he just didn't have the pace, and Hamilton gets another victory. Which, can't complain too much. We all know Hamilton's going to win by this point. Like, it's going to have to be an absolute catastrophe for Bottas to clinch it. And, yeah. Like I said, sort of decent race. But I think why people are... Because a lot of people I've heard are sort of conflicted on whether they enjoyed this race or not. And I think the reason is that it was very split down the middle, as in half of the race was fun and exciting and there was some interesting strategy. But once the sort of first part of it, like once Hamilton had pitted and we'd seen that Vettel wasn't going to pit and all the sort of early stuff had gone on and Verstappen was in the midst of his climb, at that point, like, everything had already happened. And it was basically like 35 laps of just all of our questions being answered no, as I said at the start. Yeah, that's the Mexican Grand Prix. One last thing to say is that the podium was super sick. I've heard people complaining about the trophies. I don't really care, but it sounds reasonable. People like Vettel, their complaints sound reasonable to me, so sure, I'm not interested in that. But the whole, like, the podium, super modern, having the car coming up with Hamilton on it, all that nonsense. Chester right there, ready to play everyone out. It was super dope. Seeing Sebastian push the Mexican guy away, who apparently is like, that's his thing, is that he dresses as like a mariachi racing driver and goes to racing events or something. Cool. Yeah. So that was me basically rambling about the Mexican Grand Prix. It was fun. Wasn't great. But the best thing about this Grand Prix is that it's already the next race week. And we have the United States Grand Prix literally just in like 4 or 5 days. I can start watching that and getting excited about that. We are at the point now where Hamilton might actually more reasonably snatch the championship, so I doubt we're going to stop hearing people repeatedly go on about that. We are now in the stage where this might actually be the race, because he needed 14 points more than Bottas, and he got... he was 25th, so he got like 10 points more or something. So I think now he needs about 4 points more, which suddenly is a lot more achievable. Still, I would say unlikely to happen, given that they are not looking like the fastest car now. But with how well their strategy has done at getting them wins since they've stopped being the fastest car, I could see them still doing it. So you may have it wrapped up by then. It will definitely be wrapped up by Brazil. There's no way it's going to Abu Dhabi. And a few more races left in the year. So if you like this video, leave a comment. I I don't so much care. I'm not gonna advertise the likes and subscribes so much yet, but I am gonna say that maybe this was too rambly. Maybe I shouldn't have gone over all the drivers. Maybe next time I'll try doing it rather than in the order of where they finished. Maybe doing it in the order of what happened in the race. Something different. I'm still experimenting with these. I'm gonna sort of pitch this as season 0, where I'm just trying stuff out. Maybe this is too long. Maybe I should try and aim for 10 minutes, nice quick wrap up thing. But I'm basically going to, for the next 3 races of this season, just try out stuff totally random and try to get like an idea of what I want to do for next year when I can start doing it more consistently. So thank you again for watching, and good night.